Hello, welcome everybody to Everything Entrepreneurship. I'm John Boitnott, and I talk on a somewhat often basis with different entrepreneurs about their companies, what they're doing in life, their mission, how they're helping the world in many cases. And today I'm joined by Carol Sargent over in the UK. So, Carol, tell me all about yourself and the company that you have. That you're an entrepreneur. Tell me about your company and yourself and your mission.
Yeah. My first profession was as a scientist. I was that geek in the white coat who was fortunate enough to lead a project that went all the way into phase 2B clinical trials. At that same point, my mom and then my mother in law were diagnosed with dementia. And that really turned my personal and professional life on its head. And I set up Sargent Group Consulting February last year with the goal to support businesses to recognise the dementia community as customers and also to help the broader disabled community recognise that the dementia community were part of their community. So that was the main goal of the consulting group. And when I set it up, I also set up a Facebook group, um, Dementia Travel and Tourism, to get the community speaking about what worked and what didn't work.
What's sort of an example holiday with a family and a family member what type of help does the family member who has dementia need? I know it varies, but just give us an example.
Well, I think the help and support is before you go away. It's about working out what makes home a home. What are the things that makes that individual nervous or anxious? And if you can have those discussions and conversations and put the right things in place, then that's what makes a holiday a real relaxing holiday for everybody. I think the biggest challenge in that is having those conversations as a son or a daughter, as an example, with your parents. The biggest thing is being aware that things have changed and that there are things you might have to put in place. And, one of the conversations we always used to introduce with our guests with dementia um, to make people realize actually you can chat about everything and there's a solution. We're speaking about incontinence. That's a concern for most people living with dementia, and not to be sexist in any way, but most older gentlemen who have prostate problems. Um,
Yeah.
and there's lots of ways you can think about what would make it easier. And it can be simply having that nightlight on right next to the bed and making sure
Mm.
your bed is opposite where the bathroom is and that there's a clear sign. It can be something that simple. So it's just, there are things that happen in life that you just have to find a way that works for you. um, and sometimes it's easier for strangers to have those conversations with family members rather than letting on to your children that actually you know there's you know there's there's things that aren't working quite right in my body. And dementia is an example in some ways of an accelerated aging process for some people.
Mm.
And I think those conversations are things that you know older adults don't tend to have comfortably with their children and don't tend to ask for support and help. And I think that's a real shame because that limits what people can do. And
Yeah.
there are ways you can highlight support that don't mean you've got to shout it from the top of the roof,
Yeah.
that can make you plan that holiday. And yeah, that's the sort of thing. And the other things are, what really makes a home apart from bricks and mortar? What is it that person enjoys doing? Or more importantly, what do they really dislike? You know, how often do
Yeah.
you get asked, what do you not want to do when you go away on holiday? You know, what topic of
Mm.
conversation will really make your blood boil?
It occurs to me as you talk that there are a whole lot of different lessons that people can learn from the dementia community, the disabled community, and you're sort of starting to talk about some of those. Give me one or two sort of, what are some of the big things that people can learn from interacting with folks who have dementia or are disabled?
Yeah. So I think for one, the important thing for me is live in the moment. You know, that's what we
Mm,
should all learn more about. Enjoy the moment. You know, you don't have to be extreme, but you know, don't take all that time worrying. Don't be upset if somebody hasn't remembered something. That isn't the important thing. Is did they enjoy that experience? Did you learn anything from that experience? It can equally be, we'll avoid that one in the future. But yeah, living in the present and observing in the present. I think that's the other thing. I think dementia reminds us all what we all know about communication is, you know, verbal communication is the minority way we communicate with one another. Most of it is body language. And I think
mm,
that's what we all need to learn more about because, you know, we're a society where it's quick, 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 quick. It'll be a quick message, a quick this. We don't necessarily see the body language in which that message has been written. And, you know, I'm sure you, like I, have misinterpreted messages from people, you know, depending on the mood I'm in, the mood they may be in. You know, it's really important to remember body language, yeah, and that's when you're looking and supporting somebody with dementia, particularly as verbal communication can get harder.
yeah.
Look for those responses. Is that an anxious person? Is that an excited person? Now, those things can be hard to distinguish if you don't know somebody very well, but that's quite important in a sense of understanding how that person is feeling with what they're doing at that moment in time. And I think that's something we all need to do a lot more. And I think we'd all understand one another much, much better. So
Yeah.
they're my two things.
You've worked
There's
for
lots more, but I'll stop at that.
You've worked with more than 1,600 dementia patients in the past. And it's kind of a weird question to ask, but what are some of the sort of the top dementia, travel destinations that you, do most people sort of stick around the UK, or do they go to Europe, or do they go to India, or what are some of the different, I'm sure you've seen all kinds. What are some of the
Yeah.
most popular?
So I would say the most popular are the things that people want to go and explore. You know, we're all different. If it's a new experience, it's finding out what is it you want to do. You know, is it scenery? Is it meeting people? Is it experiencing a different culture? So really, there isn't any such thing as an ideal dementia destination. It's the same as anybody else. But I think what you do need to think about here is, you know, how easy is transport, which is something we all think about when we're planning a holiday. So I think you just have to be mindful, is going through an airport you know, something that somebody's used to. So transports is a key thing about what makes that holiday. You know, price is important, yeah. Um, and thinking about things like insurance. You know, those are things that can make a holiday that is a reasonable price suddenly be outside your means. So, you know, in many ways, it's no different from any other holiday. It's making sure it's something you both want to do.
Let's talk about you as an entrepreneur, though. You've been doing this for quite a while. You started out as a scientist. How did being a scientist support you into becoming an entrepreneur and a social entrepreneur like you are?
So I think there are bits that helped me. There's bits that didn't help me, that I had to relearn. I think the bits that helped me were, as a scientist, everything is based around setting a hypothesis and a null hypothesis. So I don't, and it may sound very sad, I am spontaneous, but I always think about what um, what would I be looking for to show me that this was something successful? And I would spend a lot of time thinking about, okay, there's success from my perspective, but actually, what is my product or service for? And who are those
Yeah.
customers? And how do I measure success for them? And equally, and more important as an entrepreneur, because what you learn is you got to pivot one heck of a lot. And it's really important that you
Hmm.
pick up those failures as quickly as
Mm.
possible. Um, so
Great lesson.
that's to me is one of the things that really really helped me. I think the other thing is a perspective of risk. As a scientist
Mm.
working in big drug companies, everything I worked with could kill me. Yeah. So because they hadn't been tested. So you naturally assessed a risk and an opportunity and what the mitigations you would take. And I think that's what you need to do as an entrepreneur, and work out those things and ask yourself, can I manage that situation if that worst case scenario arises? And I think that's really important when you think about business planning, finances, you know, everything like that. But it's looking for that worst case scenario and the best case. And I was told when I went on all the incubators initially, I went on a business incubator,
Mm.
Carol, you as a scientist, I don't want the worst case scenario. Yeah. We want the best case. And I was like, but I can't guarantee the best case. So I'm always the realistic case. So those to me are
Mm.
the important things that are just embedded in everything I do. I didn't realize until I spoke to other people and realized they didn't think like that. Yeah. If they hadn't had
Right.
that
Yeah.
that training. Um,
Well, yeah.
but
It sounds like your background as a scientist really sets you up for to be able to handle certain things about being an entrepreneur very well. And as somebody who's worked with people in incubators in the past before as well, and been in incubators a little bit myself, each entrepreneur brings their own sort of mix to the table, and it sounds like that's kind of the mix that you brought to the table. Were these incubators in the U.S. or where were? And I did want to ask you about your time. You worked in the U.S. Is that correct?
yeah, yeah. So we're in the UK. I'd love to see what an incubator would be like in the US. And I think I would learn I would have learnt the thing that I had to change most in becoming an entrepreneur much better in the US, because you know
What is that thing?
so it's about speaking about yourself. It's about being truly self-confident and believing in what you do. And that's what I
Mm.
learned, by living and working in the US.
Well, Carol, we're starting to run out of time here, but I do want to. Is there anything before we finish up? Is there anything you would feel remiss if you didn't get a chance to mention to the audience out there that wants to learn more
Mm,
about what you're doing and everything along those lines?
I think one of the things, in the sense of being an entrepreneur and coming to be an entrepreneur, and in my older years, shall we say, I was 60 this year, and I think coming in to be an entrepreneur later in life is a really really good thing to do, um,
Mm.
because people have so much life experience. And I think as you get older, you understand what you're passionate about, and you
Mm.
understand, you know, your strengths and your weaknesses, and you have a greater level of self awareness. And I think that makes becoming an entrepreneur something that more people should do.
I think that's wonderful advice. Carol Sargent of Sargent Consulting Group, it's been so lovely to have you today.